Hi, my name is Dan Peterson. I'm here at Bellevue High School, and today we're going to be giving a lesson on self-concept for fundamentals of education. We have 4 essential questions that we will cover in today's 10-minute lecture. First is, what is self-concept? Number 2, what is the difference between self-esteem and self-efficacy? Number 3, how does locus of control influence the behavior of our students? And number 4, what does self-concept teach us about the success of students in the classroom and our students' motivation? Number 1, what is self-concept? Self-concept is our self-image or our self-awareness. Every human has self-awareness, and we get this about the age of 3 months. Their self-awareness is broken down in a couple different ways. We have our existential self-awareness and our categorical self-awareness. First is our existential self. Our existential self is the idea of being separate from everybody else. The idea that we are one individual and that there are many other individuals. We can interact, but we are an individual. We are not part of any large group. Number 2, categorical. As we understand who we are and that we're an individual, we often find ourselves around other people that are like us. Categorical, at early stages, we categorize ourselves by maybe our age or our sex. As we get older, we get more complex categories, including our skills, our intelligence level. As we reach puberty and beyond, we continue to change our categories, and in puberty we have some complex categories that we get ourselves into, like our sexuality and our religious affiliation, political affiliation, etc., etc. Carl Rogers is the founder of this humanist self-concept theory. He has 3 main parts that build up our self-image or our self-awareness. Number 1 is self-image, number 2 is self-esteem, and number 3 is our ideal self. These all interact and cause our self-esteem in the middle to go up or down. If our self-image is high and our self-esteem or our ideal self is low, we will have high self-esteem, and vice versa. Social identity. We have our personality traits that we have our personal identity, but our social identity we develop through our groups and our categories that we find ourselves in. And we do this by 3 steps. Number 1, we categorize. We categorize ourselves and we categorize others around us. We put ourselves in a group. My group would be a teacher. I'm a teacher. Once we find our category or our group, and we can have multiple categories, but as a teacher, I go to identification. When I identify myself as a teacher, I start to act as a teacher. I dress as a teacher. I behave as a teacher. When we are within a group, we conform to these groups. And then the 3rd part is our comparison. We like to compare ourselves in the group, and we like to compare groups. So we are constantly modulating our self-esteem by how we evaluate how we fit into that group and how our group fits into the whole picture of the world. Self-esteem and self-efficacy. Self-esteem is, do we respect ourselves, or how do we respect ourselves? And self-efficacy is actually our ability to feel that we can achieve a goal, or that we can have success doing something. It tells us how our students will approach certain things, how they will approach setting goals, and how they will approach changing their behaviors. There are 2 categories of self-efficacy. You can have strong, or you can have weak self-efficacy. If you have strong, we call this RISE, the acronym RISE. Students will recover faster from faults. They will recover faster from mistakes. They have interests. They really like to do something and they'll pursue those interests. They have strong sense of commitment to the interests that they pursue. And they enjoy difficult tasks. The more difficult the task sometimes, the more that they'll put effort into that task. They're not scared to tackle those big jobs. If you have weak self-efficacy, you what we call fall. We can fail at a certain goal, and when we fail at certain goals, we like to avoid those goals. When we avoid, we lose confidence, and after we lose confidence, we lose our personal ability to do certain tasks and goals. There are 4 major sources of our self-efficacy. The first one is mastery of experience. As we master a concept in teaching, or we master a concept as a student, we feel confident, we build our self-esteem. Social modeling. Our peers, if we see the people around us succeeding, if Johnny is succeeding, I know that I can succeed at this. Okay? So after we have social modeling, we go to social persuasion. Our peers and our teachers can help us get better. We do this by verbal encouragement and other sources of encouragement. Johnny, you did a great job on that test. You're doing well. Okay? Our last one is physiological or psychological, excuse me. We have stress and anxiety, and these stresses and anxieties can be negative impact on our self-esteem, but as we learn to cope with our stress and our anxiety, we can actually improve our self-esteem when met with a challenge that's difficult to overcome. Okay, are self-esteem and self-efficacy linked? They can be, and oftentimes they are, but we also find examples where they are not linked. The first one and the best example of this is someone like a perfectionist. Perfectionists tend to have very low self-esteem. They don't believe that they did a very good job at something, or they don't like the way that they do unless it's perfect. So they have low self-esteem, but they typically have high self-efficacy, meaning that they work very hard. They have very particular narrow interests a lot of times, and that they work very, very hard at tackling these big issues. But because they don't always succeed at 100%, sometimes their self-esteem can be very low. Narcissists have the opposite effect. They have very high self-esteem, but they typically don't work very hard for the things that they have, or they avoid things that make them uncomfortable. How does locus of control influence the behavior of our students? Locus control, what is locus of control? Locus of control is how we perceive the outside world. Do we affect the outside world, or does it affect us? We call this internal or external locus of control. External, we believe everything on the outside is affecting us. Internal, we feel that we are the responsible for passing that test or failing that test. So according to the research done in the 1980s and 1990s, and it continues on today, we know that it's been shown that our high self-concept correlates to high academic success. What we don't know is how these correlate. We don't know whether which comes first. We don't know if academic success breeds high self-esteem, or if high self-esteem breeds to academic success. So we have gone to, let's go ahead to the next slide. There's basically three models that attempt to explain this. The first model is the self-enhancement model, the second model is the skill development model, and the last model is reciprocal effects model. The self-enhancement and the skill development model compete against each other. They take very opposing views. In the self-enhancement model, we believe that the concept, or the self-concept, self-esteem, is the cause of academic success. So the more that we have, the higher self-esteem we have, the more success we're going to have. So if this were true, that we could change self-esteem at an early age, we could change the academic outcomes of our students that we come in contact with. In contrast, skill development model states that students succeed in the task, that self-concept is improved. So this model states that as we succeed, as we do well in class, then we build our self-esteem. In contrast to those two opposing models, we have the reciprocal effect model. This tells us that compromise between the two polar models, that neither one are necessarily true, that you have to have one to have the other. It implies that academic success and self-esteem are concepts that are linked to childhood academic success, and their self-concept should go up, and if the child has high self-concept, the child is predicted to have high academic success, and vice versa. Academic motivation. We're not very clear on how we can best improve academic success using academic motivation. We know that we need to individualize our motivation as much as possible, that we need to figure out whether our students have high external load of locus, or they have low external load of locus, or if they're low self-efficacy or high self-efficacy. If we find these out, we can best develop ways to motivate our students. In review, self-concept is to be self-aware. How does locus control influence what is the difference between self-esteem and self-efficacy? Self-esteem is how one respects oneself, and self-efficacy is the capability to succeed in certain situations. Locus of control is how students view the world, whether it's inside, internal, external. And 4, self-concept teaches that